Morning. Our scripture reading this morning is going to be from Exodus chapter 1, verses 15 through 21. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, "When you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him, but if it is a girl, let her live." The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is so good to be worshiping here with you all this morning. I've heard many good things about Eden over the years and have wanted to visit your community for a while now. I've been able to worship with lots of different communities this past year, and I've loved getting to know how different groups of people worship together. I left my pastoral role a little over a year ago. So this past year, I was the Zion Mennonite Church choir director, New Creation Fellowship pulpit supply preacher, adjunct instructor at Bethel College, and a student at Eastern Mennonite Seminary's Spiritual Direction program. I've been viewing this year as my year of growth, as I've been pondering my role in ministry after leaving my pastoral role. Within this growth and transitional space, I've devoted my year of pulpit supply preaching to learning about and exploring the many biblical women found throughout the Bible. I chose this route because I needed to go back to what made me fall in love with the Bible. The many biblical women I have grown to love, model, and cherish over the years. I hope that this love is shared with the many churches I encountered these past few months in a way that sparks interest from others to also explore the Bible from different perspectives. I enter into these biblical women's stories through the lens of that biblical woman and her experience. Through this lens and vantage point, we can gain new perspectives on familiar stories and possibly experience them in enlightening ways. During this year-long journey learning with biblical women, I have been reminded of the fierce strength, the vital persistence, and the illuminating wisdom of these historical biblical women. So this week, I'm bringing to you all two biblical women and their perspectives from the book of Exodus, Shiphrah and Puah. These two liberating midwives will grace our presence today as we explored together the imagery that the word midwife could bring to us and the world that we live in now. I was inspired to learn more about these two midwives during some of my spiritual direction coursework. Our first semester, we had to write our final paper on our definition of what a spiritual director is. I found myself being drawn to defining my spiritual direction practice to that of a spiritual midwife. Thinking about this word midwife, one definition can be simplified down to bring into being. A midwife is someone who assists another in bringing into being a baby. This bring into being definition could also be someone who helps another to open up their life to a new way of being. A bring into being midwife could be someone who is present in another's joys and pains, supporting them through a time of difficult transition. A bring into being midwife could also be a person who sits with someone in a time of vulnerability, working together through deep and intimate aspects of life. A midwife brings into birth. It's an image of new life that can take shape in so many different ways for every individual. So as we look at the story of Shiphrah and Puah, with an open-ended definition of midwife, we can see just how much bringing into being they truly did. Shiphrah and Puah appeared to have direct contact with the Pharaoh, who is the hierarchical and all-powerful being of their time. Shiphrah and Puah were given explicit and gruesome orders to kill every male baby that they helped Hebrew women birth. But when the Pharaoh notices that male babies were still being born and questioned the midwives as to why this was happening after this order had been given, the clever wit of Shiphrah and Puah informed the Pharaoh that the Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwives come to them. This statement not only pushes back against the Pharaoh's orders, because it's implied to readers that they are still helping at least some of the Hebrew women to give birth to their male babies and defying the Pharaoh's orders in the process. But this word vigorous that some Bible translations have could also give us as readers an insight to this wit and courage of these liberating midwives. The Latin word for vigorous stems from the root word life. And with this in mind, we can see how the Hebrew midwives inform the Pharaoh that the Hebrew women are full of life and will continue to overcome the threats of death through their identity found in life. Not only are Shiphrah and Puah defying the powers that be, the Pharaoh, but they're also informing us and him that their identity, bringing about life, resists this death order. This story about the Hebrew midwives is a story about a living liberation. Historically, it can be seen as one of the biggest liberation stories of all time, and it's vigorously led by women. The midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, start off this liberation story by defying Pharaoh's orders and continuing to bring in new life, as we heard read today in the scripture. But the liberation story is continued in the book of Exodus by other women too. There's Moses' mother, who also defied Pharaoh's orders and hid her baby boy. Then there are Moses' sister and even the Pharaoh's own daughter who join in on this liberation story by taking in and raising Moses. This is a network of women working alongside one another to push back against systems meant to destroy. But instead, they are continuing to bring in new life and a new way of being. These midwives, mothers, sisters, daughters, and community members usher in new life by assisting the vulnerable through the physical birth pains of life. But they are also ushering in new life together by offering shelter and a new way of being community together. They usher in new life by being present with one another through some of life's most intimate moments of being. Like many of these examples of liberating midwives in the story of Exodus, we too have the opportunity to usher in new life and new ways of being. We too have the opportunity to be midwives, bringing about liberation that provides us all an opportunity for new life. Midwives bring into being. Shiphrah and Puah brought into being while defying Pharaoh and opposing his law. So today, as you reflect on this story, what ways have you midwifed in your life that brought something into being? What ways did this bringing into being push back against systems already set in place and liberated this new way of being? Entering into your space today for the first time, I can only imagine from my outside perspective what your thoughts, experiences, and hopes are for liberating new ways of being in this world. I've learned this year in my schooling for spiritual direction that spiritual directors can be people who are soul witnesses to the birthquakes that bring forth new life, new soul consciousness, and transformation, according to one of our authors, Margaret Gunther. Gunther also believed that the midwife is present to another in a time of vulnerability, working in areas that are deep and intimate. So this beauty of comparing a spiritual director to a midwife supports the notion that spiritual director is also a spiritual companion to someone on their faith journey. They are present in the pains and joys of that journey, cheering and supporting the directee through it all. They also come to the relationship with some prior knowledge and share that with the directee in a companioning type of relationship. The other piece of this spiritual midwife definition is that it also relates to a new life that a baby would bring. And this new life of a baby can be compared to a new life with God. Being a spiritual director is like being a midwife where one supports another through the labor of their unfolding feelings, thoughts, and stories that is expressed through a new way of being and of listening to God. Spiritual direction has the ability to bring new life to a directee, which this, I believe, is a core practice of spiritual direction. To open up a directee to a life that they may not be aware of from their past religious experiences. So as an outsider here, I wonder if this could be an opportunity for you all to companion and sit with others as their transformation occurs. To sit and listen to people's stories and faith journeys. To find ways that you can sit with one another in the public and hidden pain of being. And to share in the laughter and joy of our ways of being. This idea behind Liberating Midwives provides a perspective that we all have the opportunity to bring into being a new life for ourselves and those that we choose to walk with today. This can go beyond our blood relationships, beyond our 9-to-5 work, and beyond the people who we have chosen to be in this life with. As we think about ushering in a new way of life for ourselves and a new way of life in liberating ways for others, also consider those transitions that are needed most, or more often than not, overlooked. That hidden pain, those untold stories, and the movements that will send quakes through life as we know it. And also recognize that we can't do everything and that we might quite possibly not be doing this work alone if we take a moment to look around us. In this story of the Exodus liberation, we watch as two women kick off the liberation of new life together, and is continued with the help of numerous people further supporting this liberation journey. I believe that the church still has a lot to learn from women found in the story of the Exodus liberation. Like Shiphrah and Puah, we can be clever and push back against systems that are meant to destroy, and instead find ways to lift one another up, like Shiphrah and Puah show us as they lift up new life every day in these challenging times. Like Moses' mother, we can follow our heart and care for those we love, even when people tell us not to. And like Moses' sister and the Pharaoh's daughter, who knowingly helped raise someone who would grow up to liberate an entire population of people, we too can help teach others the importance of liberation. We too can share the dream that Liberating Midwives brings to us in this story, ushering in new ideas, new ways of living, and maybe a new way of being.